I am your host, Chad, here for another episode of The Real MMA Today. This, of course, is 4th of July week, which means a big UFC event in Las Vegas, Nevada. That coming up Saturday. I know it's been a while since we've been with you guys. It's been about 4 weeks. I had to take a little vacation, a little R&R for me and the missus. But now we're back. We're back in full mode. Getting ready to have a unbelievable card this Saturday night, including a goodbye to a legend in what could be the fight of the year between Anderson Silva and Sonnen. Before we get into all that, of course, I got to get my business out of the way. Please follow us on Twitter. You can do so by looking for The Real MMA Today. Also, please like us on our Facebook page. You can do so by going to facebook.com/The Real MMA Today. Please, if you ever want to email me, you can do so. Email the show. You can do so at MMAtoday@rocketmail.com. And if you want to give us a call over the next, say, 25 minutes or so, do so at 347-324-3423. Now, of course, this weekend is UFC 148 from Las Vegas, Nevada. Of course, the whole week is huge out there. I guess it's going on at the end of the week, and then, of course, end with UFC 148, Silva versus Sonnen 2. Also wanted to get into a little bit of what I did on my vacation. Of course, went to Biloxi, Mississippi. Went to gamble for a little bit. If anyone's been down there, it's kind of fun. Lose a lot of money, that's usually what happens. But the reason why I wanted to share it with you is I stayed at the IP Casino, and I'm walking through the halls, and I see this guy, and I'm like, who is that? And it was Filthy Tom Lawler was past us in the halls. I thought that was a pretty neat little tidbit of, follows me on vacation too, I guess. So it's there wherever I'm at. I can go over to Biloxi and still MMA finds me. Of course, we have changed some things about the show. We've gotten some new staff on the show. We're changing some things around. So you will be seeing some changes here in the near future. Also, if you guys know of anybody or are starting a MMA website that's looking for a radio station to maybe partner with, email me at MMAtoday@rocketmail.com. That would be the best way to get in touch with me. That way we can, maybe work something out and get some collaboration or a partnership going on that. So if you guys know of anybody, if you're starting a MMA website, please, again, email me at MMAtoday@rocketmail.com. But this Saturday night, it will be UFC 148. It's a card that I think a lot of people, including myself, have been looking forward to tremendously. And I will start with the FX portion of the card. The first fight on the FX portion of the card is going to be John Alessio versus Shane Roller. Now, Alessio comes in at 34-15. He is 0-4 in the UFC. In his last fight, he actually had a loss to Mark Bocek, which, of course, is nothing to really shrug at. But, of course, a loss is a loss. That was back at UFC 145 in April, which, of course, was here in Atlanta, Georgia, where we broadcast out of. Shane Roller is coming into this fight at 10-6. He's 1-3 in the UFC. He's actually lost his last 3. Those, however, were against Gillard, TJ Grant, and Michael Johnson. So, Shane Roller's kind of in one of those positions. Both of these guys are really, I guess you could say, is in one of those positions where the loser might be cut from the UFC. But I like Shane Roller. Some of the events here lately, they've been kind of slow starting, and I'm hoping that we can get a second-round knockout by Shane Roller to maybe kick this one off. So I'm going to go with Shane Roller by second-round KO. The next fight on the FX portion of the card is going to be Costa Philippou versus Ricky Fukuda. Now, Philippou comes in at 10-2. He is 3-1 in the UFC. He beat Court McGee, of course, who's an Ultimate Fighter winner back in March, and he's actually won 3 straight. So Philippe is really coming on. He's kind of in one of those, I guess a lot of the guys you see on these FX portions, I guess I could say this for, but he's really coming into his own, and he's going to either take that next step up to the upper echelon fighters, or he's going to take a step back down in that middle range right now. So we'll have to see what he does here against Fukuda. Now Fukuda comes in at 18-5. He is 1-1 in the UFC. He beat Steve Cantwell back at UFC 144 over in Japan. He's actually won 8 of his last 9 fights. So what I said about Philippe, go ahead and add it on for Fukuda, because one of these guys is going to take the next step up. One of these guys is going to take the next step down. I like Fukuda in this match. I think it's going to go the distance. I think really, you kind of got to ask yourself, are any of these guys really finishers? Have they finished a lot in the past? And the answer is really no. So I'm going to go with Fukuda by decision in this one. The next matchup we're going to take a look at is Gleison Tibau versus Khabib. Now, I want everybody to take a step back and say this with me, because I don't think anyone's going to get this right on the first try. Unless he's your brother, maybe you have the same last name, but this name is almost impossible to nail on the first try. It's Nurmagomedov. Khabib. Okay. It's Gleison Tibau comes in at 34-7, 10-5. He is 11-4 since dropping down 155 pounds from the welterweight division. He has 2 losses in his last 9 fights, was to Melvin Gillard and Jim Miller, 2 of I would consider the top echelon guys at 155 pounds. So Gleison Tibau, another guy, I'm just going to keep saying it, I guess, that needs to really, he's going to take a step up or a step down. Now, Khabib, we're not even going to try to say the last name now. If you want to try at home, give me a call. Let me know how it's pronounced, because this is impossible at this point. I seem to know. He's 1-0 in the UFC. He beat Kamal Belarus back in January. And so this is a big fight for Khabib. Now, Gleison Tibau is a huge step up in competition for Khabib, and I think that's going to be the difference in this one. I think Tibau is going to I think it's going to be a feeling out process in the first round and a half for these 2 guys. I don't see either one of these guys really running out to the middle of the octagon and trying to really pound it out. Of course, now Saturday night, we all know that's the first thing they're going to do, is they're going to run out in the middle of the ring and pound it out and make me look like an idiot. But it won't be the first and it won't be the last time that I look like an idiot. But Tibau's going to come out in this one, I think, and win it by decision. I think his experience factor in the UFC and the main event, I guess you could, the FX portion of the card, I got my 2 fingers up. The FX portion of the card is Melvin Gillard versus Fabricio Camus. Now, Melvin Gillard is in a huge need of a win here. He's 46-11-3 with 1 no contest in his MMA career. He's 10-6 in the UFC. The reason why I said he's in need of a win here is because he's lost 2 straight. He's lost to Joe Lozon, and that was followed up by another loss to Jim Miller. Now again, Melvin Gillard I still consider in the top, half of the 155-pound division. Joe Lozon and Jim Miller are 2 guys that really you cannot really hang your head if you lose to them. And honestly, I think if Gillard faces than Melvin Gillard, and he showed us in that fight, but that wasn't even a close fight. So Gillard really has nothing to hang his head on. He's, of course, down there training with Rashad Evans and the Black Zillions down in Boca Raton, Florida. So, Gillard promised a different Melvin Gillard in his last fight with Jim Miller. I didn't see it, and I don't think a lot of you guys out there saw it. So we're going to have to wait and see if maybe a little bit more time down there, training with Rashad and company, helps him a little bit more. Fabricio Camus comes in at 13-6-1. He's 1-1-1 in the UFC, and he is 10-1-1 in his last 12 fights. So Camus could really, get a win under a bigger name here in Melvin Gillard. So it's a very important fight for Camus. I just think Gillard's going to be hungry in this one. I think he's going to really need this win, and it's going to show. I think Bell, and I like Melvin Gillard to get this one by second round knockout. I think he doesn't really have the, huge knockout power. So I think he's going to try to wear down Camus a little bit, and I think he's going to end up getting that win by second round KO. Then it'll be 10 o'clock here in the East, 7 over in the Pacific. And there will be time for the pay-per-view portion of UFC 148. That will be kicked off by Ivan Menjivar versus Mike Easton. Now, Menjivar comes in at 24-8. He is 3-1 in the UFC. He has won 3 straight fights, and he won a submission of the night in his last fight. So, Menjivar's got a little bit of submission ability here. Mike Easton, of course, we know if anyone's seen him, he's a huge, small guy. I know that sounds completely ironic, but he is a huge, small guy. He looks like a tank. I don't know. He's just huge, small guy. If you don't believe me, tune in on Saturday night and you'll see what I'm talking about. But Mike Easton comes in at 12-1. He's 2-0 in the UFC. He's won 7 straight fights. Beat Jared Papazian back at UFC on FX in January in his last fight. And I think this is when we're going to start to see some of that knockout ability. I think we're going to see that first round explosion to kick off the pay-per-view. I think Mike Easton is going to completely dominate Ivan Menjivar with his strength and win by first round KO in this one. If anyone is on their computer, obviously everyone's on their computer. Who am I kidding? But if anyone's on their computer, Alistair Overeem at Alistair Overeem just tweeted a picture of his brand new car. And I'm telling you, I'm in the wrong profession. Now, obviously, I probably wasn't gifted with the natural ability to fight. I wasn't given that God-gifted talent. But, man, that car is nice. It's like an Audi. If you want to see a picture of it, go over to Twitter.com and follow Alistair Overeem, or if you're already following Alistair Overeem. It looks like he tweeted this out about 10, 15 minutes. But wow, that's a nice car. I need to see how I can get Alistair Overeem money. No comments. I know the peanut gallery. You guys are already saying a few words, especially if you're not fans of Alistair Overeem. But we won't go there here on the Real MMA today. The next fight on the UFC 148 card is going to be Chad Money Mendez versus Cody McKenzie. Of course, Chad Money Mendez was headlining an event not too long ago. He's 11-1 in his MMA career. He is 2 UFC. Of course, his only loss was to the champion Jose Aldo back at UFC 142 that he headlined. It's amazing. He goes from headlining an event, and now he's barely making the pay-per-view portion of the card. He's facing Cody McKenzie, who is 13-2. He is 2-2 in the UFC. He, of course, was a member of Team GSP on the Ultimate Fighter Season 12. He's making actually his UFC team chokes because he's won 11 of his 13 wins have come by one submission, a guillotine choke. And that amazes me. It amazes me. If you're facing Cody McKenzie at this point, their whole training camp should be on defending the guillotine choke. That's basically what he's good at. And that's the only step. Because 13-2, 2-2 in the UFC, he's obviously been exposed in 2 fights in the UFC. They probably spent their training camp defending the guillotine choke. But I think Chad Mendez, of course, he trains with Uriah Faber, Team Alpha Male. I think he's going to have a great defense of that guillotine choke. And it's an important fight for Chad Mendez. He's really got to come out and prove a point. And I don't know who Cody McKenzie made mad with the UFC, but he's making his featherweight debut, and he's fighting the guy who just fought for the belt. Does that make sense to anybody else? I mean, you'd think they'd give him a warm-up fight, maybe to see how good he is in the featherweight division before they give him Chad Mendes, but, we'll see. Now, the next fight on the UFC 148 card is Dung Dung versus Damian Maia. Now, Kim comes in at 15-1-1. He has one no contest on his record. He is 6-1 with one no contest in the UFC. His only loss was to interim champion Carlos Condit. So you really, can't blame this guy. Is a top guy at 170 pounds. So we're going to have to wait and see exactly where he puts him in the standings because that division is log jammed at the top and no one really knows what's going on. Damian Maia is 15-4. He is 9-4 in the UFC. His last fight, he lost to Chris Weidman. That was back at UFC on Fox back in January. This will be his welterweight debut. And believe it or not, his last 7 fights have gone the distance for Damian Maia. So he's a guy who usually goes the distance, and you'll see why I made my prediction that way now. I have Kim winning the fight, but I have a decision. I think it'll go the distance. Damian Maia is a tough guy, especially at 185 pounds. We'll have to wait and see how that weight cut affects him coming down to 170 pounds. But Dung Dung Kim is a guy who I think is a guy on a mission. Carlos Condit, that fight with Carlos Condit didn't go his way, but now I think he's looking to maybe take that next step, 170 pounds. He's going to have to wait in line, it seems like forever, until GSP gets back. But we'll have to wait and see. But I like Kim to win this fight by decision. Then it starts to get some interesting fights. Patrick Cote, if anyone hasn't heard, is returning to the UFC on Saturday night. He'll be facing Kung Lee. Yes, Kung Lee, who is a Hollywood movie star, Kung Lee. So you never really know which fighter you're going to get in Kung Lee. But Kung Lee comes in at 7-2. He is 0-1 in the UFC. Came to Vanderlei Silva back at UFC 139. And his fight with Vanderlei Silva was fight of the night. So it was a good fight. And I remember watching that fight thinking, both of these guys will really come out. But you don't really know because Vanderlei Silva just lost to Rich Franklin. So does, where's Kung Lee in the whole pecking order? And Kung Lee, when he was in Strikeforce coming up, he did fight a couple of question opponents. But, we'll have to wait and see how he does here against Patrick Cote, who comes in at 18-7. He is 4 and this time he actually fought in the UFC was back at UFC 121 against a guy we ran into in Biloxi and Tom Lawler. So, it all comes full circle, people. It all comes full circle. But Patrick Cote, Kung Lee, I think Lee is going to come out. He needs a win because they were talking about him retiring after his last fight. But I like Lee to win this one by second round KO. Then the co-main event of the evening. Both of these guys, former light heavyweight champions. Forrest Griffin, Tito Ortiz. He lost to Shogun Rua back at UFC 134. Of course, everybody knows he's the winner of the first Ultimate Fighter. Tito Ortiz comes into this fight at 17-10-1. He's 15-10-1 in the UFC. This will be his last fight in the octagon. If you are a Tito Ortiz fan, I'm sure you already knew that. But if you're not a Tito Ortiz fan, you just enjoy the sport, maybe you're new to the sport, tune in because you're about to see a legend walk away from the sport. And Tito Ortiz, I'm personally not a huge fan of Ortiz, but I am a huge fan of MMA, and I'm a huge fan of what he did for MMA. So I will be tuning in to see his last fight and say goodbye to Tito Ortiz. Of course, this week's a big leap for Tito Ortiz because at the UFC Fan Expo, he will be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. And he's actually, believe it or not, I was doing some research for this fight, and he's only won once in his last 8 fights, and that is, of course, against Ryan Bader. So I think it's time for Tito Ortiz to go. And, it's kind of weird. It's kind of like seeing one of those guys that was really great Michael Jordan. I'll give you Michael Jordan. Sports fans, Michael Jordan. With the Bulls, he was really great, and then he saw him with the Washington Wizards. Enough said. That's where Tito Ortiz, he's with the Washington Wizards at this point in his career. Because he's only won one fight in his last 8 fights, I'm going to go with Forrest Griffin. However, I'm going to put a huge asterisk on that because what Forrest Griffin are we going to be able to see here? Will we see the Forrest Griffin who comes out and just bangs and wants to win a fight, or you come the unmotivated Forrest Griffin? I'm hoping we'll see the guy who comes out and bangs and really wants to fight and gets in Tito Ortiz's face. I hope he goes out with a bang, and I hope this is a great fight because we know both of these guys are near the end of their career. Then the main event of the evening, of course, they had the press conference earlier today, and honestly, I think Chael Sonnen has met his goal of getting in Anderson Silva's head because it was really awkward, the things that Anderson Silva was saying. You know, following the sport for a long time like I have, I've not seen this side of Anderson Silva, and I think a lot of people have said the same thing. And I just think Chael Sonnen might have gotten to his head a little bit, and we're going to have to see how it affects him. Maybe Anderson Silva comes out and is more motivated because Anderson Silva not motivated from time to time. So we'll have to wait and see. Of course, Anderson Silva is the champion at 185 pounds. He is 29-4 in his MMA career. He is 14-0 in the UFC. He has a record 9 title defenses. He also has a record of 14 consecutive UFC wins. He has not lost since January of 2006. I'll repeat that again. Not lost since January of 2006. One guy has come close to beating him. He's beaten him for 4.5 rounds. What's his name? Chael Sonnen. Chael Sonnen comes into this fight at 28-11-1. He's 6-4 in the UFC. He's won 5 of his last 6 bouts. He, of course, controlled, like I said, Anderson Silva for 4.5 rounds until he got caught in a triangle and tapped and submitted. Of course, Chael Sonnen, the people's champion, at the press conference earlier today. It was kind of interesting because they both got in their face. They had to be physically restrained, again, put in quotation marks, by Dana White. I don't really know. I got a feeling it's going to be one of those, we're hyping the fight, and then after the fight's over, they'll hug each other like I've seen 100 million times before. We're going to have to wait and see. Fan of MMA, maybe you're new to the show, maybe you're new to MMA, you tune Chael Sonnen. And you're going to be entertained with some of the things that man says. He is a funny guy. So, time for my prediction. Chael Sonnen will be the new 185-pound champion on Saturday night. He calls himself the People's Champion. He'll have the belt to go with it. I think he finishes the job this time. It'll be by decision because Anderson Silva is still a strong champion. But I like Chael Sonnen to win this one by decision. That will conclude our UFC 148 preview show this week. Of course, we had to do the show on Tuesday due to the 4th of July holiday that's going on here in the United States tomorrow. So a lot of you people will have plans. Enjoy your 4th of July holiday. It is a great place to live here in the United States, and I want to thank everybody that's made this land free and helped make this land free. But it's a great place to live, and enjoy your 4th of July, and remember the people that helped make this land free and all the people that have come before us. I wanted to, again, if you... at The Real MMA Today. You can email me your predictions for UFC 148. Do so at MMAtoday@rocketmail.com. Thank you guys so much for listening every week. We will be back next Wednesday. We're going back to our Wednesday time slot. We'll review UFC 148. Jeez, OP. UFC 148.